Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome. When you look back on the previous year, everybody thinks of what you've done that is productive and useful. I don't do that because it's most embarrassing. But in 2021, I was able to publish a book of short stories, which is 14 stories and one rogue. Um, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it after we are done with the reading of a part of one story. Uh, this story that I'm going to read out to you is based on it's set in a beautiful part of the Northeast, which is Upper Assam, which is where I grew up. So the title of the story is Let Sleeping Elephants Lie. When a large male elephant wandered into Bokapara hamlet in a remote part of Dibrugarh district in Assam, there was no commotion. It was, after all, 2 in the morning, and the inhabitants had just concluded a festive evening of music, noise, and roasted fish. All of this, when combined with prodigious quantities of lau pani, which is the local rice beer, and tambul, arecanut, can be formidable enough to earn many hours of sleep. Sound sleep, it should be emphasized. For the results of this overindulgence were audible to anyone, should anyone have been awake to hear it. Every hut had its share of snorers, and in 2 huts located side by side, there was overlapping melody as well, as the crescendo of snores in one hut offset the ebb in the other. The sole stray dog in the village was only a puppy, the others having long since become victims of a hungry leopard that lived in the forests nearby. And this little fellow was well fed and asleep inside a hut. So the entry of the pachyderm was a quiet one. The tusker wandered in looking for food. Whether it was hungry or not, one cannot tell, for elephants tend to eat for much of the day. But it sauntered in, as is typical of these giants, with its head swaying mildly from side to side. The tusker was a lonely fellow, having been ejected out of his herd by his rather stern mother, the matriarch. And it was by and large an arrangement he was fine with. He stopped at the entrance of the narrow street, the only street in the village, and sniffed the air with his trunk while looking around for a nearby snack. There was a banana plant with a ripening bunch of bananas dangling enticingly from it. So he strolled towards it, stripped the soft outer bark of the plant stem playfully, and then twisted the bunch of bananas off the stem, the sticky juice dripping onto his tusk. He then crunched through the entire offering of about 100 bananas in a matter of moments, and then munched contentedly at the stem and the banana flower that hadn't quite gone down the gullet. That felt good. Once that was done, he turned his attention to the small cottage next to the banana plant, and this smelled of food as well. In this case, sugar. The elephant could not have known that the sugar and the cottage belonged to Mahuti, the local shopkeeper, who, having been to the wholesale market earlier in the day, had brought back with him the usual set of provisions to sell over the next few days to neighbors. Had the elephant known this crucial fact, it would not, of course, have made the slightest difference to his intention. He looked over the wall of the storeroom and spied the sack of sugar on the floor. And to lift it with the trunk right over the wall and drop it on the road was with him the work of a moment. The sack tore open, and about a quarter of its contents scattered all around. The morsels of sugar on his trunk tasted delicious. And elephants are not known to be patient in matters of gastronomy. So our friend lifted the torn sack right into his mouth and grunted softly in pleasure as he crunched through a hamlet's weekly supply of sugar. As he wandered further down the street then, he began to sway about a bit, for the sugar was making its presence felt within. He would have walked straight on across the paddy field and into the forest, but then he smelled something else that grabbed his attention. It was a heady, tantalizing aroma, something that he had never smelled in a village. And the richness of the scent took him right back to the time when he had visited an abandoned farm with jackfruit trees, many of which had fruits that were rotting. The smell of robust fermentation emanated from the front porch of a little cottage on his left. And he began his investigation by running his trunk along the periphery of the porch. At first, it was frustrating. Just when the smell got stronger, the trunk seemed to touch a smooth and unusually cool surface, which the human sleeping inside the cottage would have called the aluminum lid of a barrel sunk into the ground. Now, the one thing we all know about elephants is that they are clever, very clever. Even as our tusker was getting frustrated with the lid that refused to lift itself off, he realized that another tactic was needed. Uprooting a nearby stick, he proceeded to give the lid the third-degree treatment, beating it rhythmically until, with a soft splash, the now bent lid fell into the liquid in the barrel. Astonishingly, not one human being got up, though a few turned in their sleep, muttering dark curses in fluent Assamese at the ones making the noise outside. The aroma that arose from the barrel justified the effort. It was every bit as alluring as the tusker had imagined. It reminded him of fallen wild mangoes after the first April shower, figs that he had gorged on a few days ago, and jackfruit that had aged on a tree to a mild brown. The barrel and the hut belonged to Gogoi, the expert local brewer of rice beer, or Lao Pani, and the effervescent liquid in it was in an advanced stage of fermentation. The tusker dipped his trunk into the barrel and savored the sensation. It was sweet and frothy, and unlike anything he had tasted earlier. And it seemed to call out to him, asking to be consumed at once. History will judge this tusker as one who listened to the calls of others, even if the other was a barrel of the finest Lao Pani. He swished the elixir around for a moment with his trunk, and then, just as one would fill a fountain pen with ink using a filler, he sucked up the liquid and emptied it into his cavernous mouth. As the liquid poured down the gullet and reached his large tummy, the big fellow tottered in shock and took a step back in surprise and defense against an unseen enemy. Gogoi believed in making a strong brew and had earned his reputation as a value for money chap. And the tusker now had in his belly a few liters of alcohol, a mere couple of glasses of which could knock out an experienced old hand who had lived alongside Lao Pani all his life. I'm going to stop the reading here and will allow you to guess if what happens after this tusker gets inebriated and the village wakes up in the morning. You might have a question on whether this tusker is the rogue that I'm referring to when I titled the book 14 Stories and One Rogue. And you'll be happy to know that the tusker is not the rogue. The rogue actually appears in the last story, the 15th one. And you must remember that a tusker, however inebriated, is still a gentleman. Thank you.